There weren't many podcasts which tipped Ireland to win by 20 plus points, but we did. Welcome back to the Kaylan S Rugby Podcast, 2023 Rugby World Cup pool stage recaps as we take a look back on Ireland's convincing 36-14 win over Scotland in Paris last night to set up a quarter-final bout with New Zealand this coming Saturday. Join me this afternoon are three returnees to the podcast. Firstly, making his first appearance this season is Red Hand podcast host Peter Lockhart. So welcome back, Peter.
Thanks, Keelan.
And we also have more returnees, firstly in the form of Leinster and Ireland fan Tom Coleman, who wins his fourth cap today. So welcome back, Tom.
Cheers, Caelan. Thanks for the invite again.
Always good to have you on. And we had to have a Scottish perspective, even if I'm not sure if he wants to be here. He hasn't addressed that yet, but we have David Arnott joining us as well. So welcome back on, David.
Cheers, Caelan. How we doing?
All good now, and always good to have you on, lads. And as always, we start with just kind of the overall thoughts of the game. I'll start with yourself, Tom. Good win for Ireland, bonus point secured, place in the quarterfinals. But what was your main takeaway from last night?
Well, first of all, I just having met David for the first time, and the last thing he wants is my sympathy. But I had to do the Leinster pod the Sunday after Leinster got back by La Rochelle, so I know exactly how he feels, and he has better things to be doing than reanalyzing this game. So look, I feel your pain, mate. It's not that long ago in May since I went through the same ordeal having to review a shite match, so fair dues to you for coming on. As for the match itself, yeah, look, there was obviously a lot of chatter before the game about, it's a long rivalry with Ireland and Scotland, you know what I mean? It's doesn't need to be said, you know what I mean? There's a bit of rivalry there as well at club level especially between Munster and Glasgow's. Little bit of needle, and that always brings, I think both teams always sort of bring it, but from an Irish point of view, it was a fantastic performance. It's very hard to be down about any particular element of how the game went. I think, I know it's oversimplistic to say this, but I think probably Farrell got his selection right. There's consistency there, and for me, I said it before the match, this isn't even hindsight, I've said elsewhere, I just felt Townsend got his selection wrong. I think Ireland went after Darcy Graham a little bit early in the first few minutes, and they did get some reward, especially when we were trying to find a little bit of foothold in the game. I know we got an early try through low, but Scotland did have a lot of ball for about 10 or 15 minutes. They weren't really testing the Irish defence. I know there was a lot of infringements, and Scotland decided to, I think they were thinking of the 4 tries before they were thinking about the 3 points or what they thought they needed. And sometimes I think we've all looked at enough games over the years, whether it be for Ulster or Munster or Glasgow or my own Leinster team, and you just realise you need to sort of win the game before you start thinking about tries. And maybe that was just a little bit of an error. Maybe they had no choice but to feel that they needed to go at every opportunity. So it's very hard. It's easy for me to sit in judgment in the sideline. But when the teams was announced, I was delighted Hamish Watson wasn't named. And I know that was compounded by their captain going off, which was a big loss in Richie. But Scotland were having difficulties around the breakdown. And look, I know people say, how do you stop? Is that the breakdown? I think our ruck speed went out over 4 seconds against the South Africans. I know we won that game, but for me, somebody like Hamish Watson was a must in that 23. There was an argument maybe staying on the wing would be a lot more defensively sound, especially when Scotland probably knew what was coming from Ireland, whether it be Lowe's exiting, which he got a few big boomers, or just targeting Graham at the air. We did get some return off that at a time when we just needed to get a little bit of foothold in the game, even though it was only 5-3. So and then I think I'm trying to remember the last, of course, the call at 9 was a strange one. White seems to be the go-to man, and just to change back to Price was a bit strange as well. I think, people might say the match started off badly for Scotland with the early low try, but I think myself, just the selection was where the issue started. Now, who knows how the game would have ended up otherwise, but I just think from an Irish point of view, I was delighted that Watson and Steyn weren't playing, and I was a bit surprised by Price starting. So really from there, once Ireland got the second try, it was very difficult for Scotland to get back into it. That's how I felt the pre-game went, and just I thought Townsend just made a few mistakes. Again, hindsight is great, but that was just my own thoughts before the game, and I'd seen nothing during the game to make me think otherwise.
Yeah, and that's understandable, and it's echoing a lot of the sentiments we made in the preview pod. That even myself, I thought, geez, considering that the Scotland wingers were defensively showing up in March, not to go with Stain, who's just that more solid choice, was one that stood out. Watson as well, as you said, and we will get into kind of the injuries and Scotland 6-2 and all that with David later on. But Peter, I might come to you first. Tom said there Scotland looked like a team who chased the game, who chased the bonus points straight away. I remember Rod on one of his many interviews said before that every time Munster needed a bonus point, they'll always kick the first penalty because it got it out of their head that they were chasing it, and that kind of a mindset. Scotland didn't really seem to have that. It was very rushed. Obviously Ireland got off to a fast start, but in general, it did feel like the tone was set in the first maybe 15 minutes of that game.
Well, yeah, I agree. And I think from a psychological perspective, from the Ireland team, well, to start with, I go into a lot of these games pessimistic, and I do that because then you're pleasantly surprised, if we do okay.
It's a good attitude to have.
It's such an Irish mentality. Now, I don't like this this label of being favourites going into games, because even the trash talk during the week, I was hoping that wouldn't get to us, Razzie Erasmus with his cheeky comments during the week, trying to unsettle Ireland a wee bit. Even Blair Kinghorn coming out during the week saying, we want to end Ireland's tournament and all that. I don't want to misquote him, but I'm pretty sure his words to that effect. And of course he does, absolutely. But it was just a bit of trash talk during the week, and the same from Ireland. Ireland were getting very arrogant, and I don't like being too arrogant, because you only set yourself up for a massive fall. Now, that didn't happen, obviously. A part of that was, like, obviously Scotland were poor. The opening stages of this game were absolutely key. I think it settled us as fans. It obviously settled the team. Ireland do what they always do. They sort of suck teams in. They get into a dangerous position. They're pretty clinical in the opposition 22. Narrowed their defence. Some big carries, chucked it up, and then an early try. The thing that was most pleasing for me, and I know there's many aspects which we'll come to in this game that were some outstanding individual performances, but it was the Irish defence. And I know, right, granted, Scotland didn't offer a huge amount going forward, but they did they went through a lot of phases. There's waves of Scotland attack, in the opening stages.
I think Ireland made 200 tackles, just to throw
yeah. No, that's I mean, hugely impressive. But it was just, there was that passage it had up near, probably near enough 20 phases. They actually ended up going backwards by the end of that. It was an impenetrable wall of defence, and it was good. And that psychological battle that you win, how disheartening would that be if you're doing everything you're told to do by your coach? Townsend will inevitably have told them to do that, be patient, build up, go through your phases, get points on the board. And whenever you're being knocked back, every time, that's a huge psychological blow. And then when Kinghorn went off, Jimmy Ritchie went off, you could sense heads were dropping. Now, they came back into it a wee bit more, but again, just we dismantled Scotland in every area, really. Even line out O'Mahony, like, again, we'll talk about him later on, but so disruptive in the line out, stole a couple. Ireland were clinical, and overall, look, a very impressive game and a huge psychological boost going into the quarterfinals.
100% agree. And the flip side of it is, yes, Ireland are coming in on high, and probably the point that I was stressing to make last night was this was not a perfect performance from Ireland. They made an awful lot of handling errors. The 2 tries they conceded, they'd be very disappointed with in their own regard, especially considering, we'd only conceded 1 try a game in the first 3. David, for your perspective now, like I was chatting to a Scotsman in the pub last night at halftime, and he just said they haven't shown up. They have not been there so far, and that must be the most infuriating thing, because to lose, yes, to come third in this pool is not a bad thing, but for Scotland to lose by 20 points, lost by 12 to South Africa, it feels like they never really fully fired a shot yet in this tournament.
No, I think that's probably the most disappointing thing, is that for certainly two of the biggest games in our recent history, and we never showed up for either of them. We fronted up well against South Africa first half, never appeared second half, and this time other than maybe a kind of 10-minute spell in the first half, never done anything. You know, we've walked away from 10 minutes of good possession, as Peter had said there, and walked away with nothing. Went backwards, kept going backwards, kept trying to push for the try. Couldn't get through that Irish defence, which is phenomenal. I mean, that's a ridiculous defence. You know, Donald Trump could have built a wall out of that, and nobody would have got through. You know, we did nothing. We did nothing. We're going home because ultimately we don't deserve to go through. That's my opinion. You have to show up in these big games, and had we, as unlikely as it seems, had gone toe to toe with Ireland and maybe come out, you know, with a 40 to 30 point loss, so you know, having scored a few tries ourselves or whatever, there'd be no shame. There'd be no, you know, we've gone head to head with them. We've given everything we can, and we've not got through. But it was the nature of it, you know, to turn up with, what was it, 65th minute we scored or something. You know, it's far too late to do anything. We can't argue. We can't argue.
Yeah, no, that's a fair way of looking at it, because it was like, how many games would you win when you don't score a try for 60 minutes and you're playing a team who don't concede tries? You know, it's very hard to play your way into it then from there, isn't it?
And don't get me wrong. I mean, if we had taken the 3 points early on, would it have made much of a difference? Ultimately, probably not. No, but you know, I think we were partly guilty of trying to get ahead and get those big points and those tries early on, when what we needed to do first of all was just try and win the game. You know, that was, I was having a conversation with somebody last Saturday, and that was what I had said then as well, is that we need to be in a position to win the game. There's no point in trying to win it straight away. We need to be in a position where, with 15, 20 minutes to go, maybe we can do something. Maybe we've frustrated Ireland, stopped them from doing anything, and we've got to a point where, okay, let's, you know, now we need to chase it a bit, let's go for it. There's no point in trying to chase it straight away. And I think that's what we tried to do, and it did us nothing.
I think, just adding to what you were saying there, David, I think if you look at the Six Nations game earlier in the year, I think, going back to the coaches, I think the Irish coaches learned something out of that game, because there was times when Scotland really stressed that Irish defence in the Six Nations. I know the game went a bit skew-ways after that with line-out and stuff, but in that first half, I think one of the said was Hugh Jones scored a try. Scotland were finding holes, and Ireland seemed to have corrected that. I know, obviously, not just for Scotland, but for the World Cup.
Yeah.
Where Scotland, obviously, there's a weakness out wide in defence. You know what I mean? It's been highlighted 100 times, but even by amateurs like ourselves, and it's never really been fixed. You know, I think Townsend maybe is something to answer for that. Like, if something that obvious where two Scottish wingers, which are talented guys, absolutely will rack up tries no matter where they play.
Well,
the system is a weakness there for wide defence, and it just, Ireland obviously gets so much off going wide eventually that shouldn't have been a surprise. And I think that all the tries went to the corner, maybe apart from Dan Sheehan's was in the corner too. They were literally in the tram line, so you know.
Well, I think that's been a massive problem for us. I mean, you watch any game with, no offence to him, I'm going to single him out here, but you watch any game with Duhan van der Merwe, and he is one of the best attacking wingers in the world, without a shadow of a doubt. He'll score you. You know, he's not played that many games for us. He's already well up there on the try scoring list. But defensively, he's suspect, very suspect, and he's easy to get through. And he reminds me a lot, except a lot bigger, of Tim Visser, who was exactly the same for Scotland. Scored a lot of tries, but defensively questionable. And when you have that on one side, and then Graham didn't do particularly great either last night, Stein would have been a big difference there, I think. I'm not saying we would have won. No, it's not. You know, Ireland would have won. Looking at how they played, Ireland would have won regardless of who we'd picked last night. Even if we'd picked a 1990, what do you call it, Five Nations winning squad, they would have won. But you know, you had to. We made some questionable calls in big areas that have now ultimately come back to haunt us.
That's all very fair. We will get into Scotland in kind of a. We'll talk about maybe the injuries, the bench, and maybe going
Do we have
forward. What was that, dude?
Do we have to?
Unfortunately, well, I can take it if you want, but then I don't think anyone really wants that. Like, to be honest. Tom, we'll start with yourself because I just want to run through the match, kind of, and the key talking points. And probably the big one was Ireland's fast start, because we talked about, their ability to start fast, especially we've seen it in the New Zealand tour, we've seen it in Six Nations games, and when James Lowe crosses, you kind of think, okay, that's straight away that pendulum of momentum and pressure. It's just all on Scotland now. Within, what was it, 63 seconds or something the score was, or something like that. That was huge for Ireland. Were you expecting them to come out of the blocks, or well, how did you take that? Because it was, some people expected it, some people called it, others didn't.
Yeah, no, I do expect it. I said, look, just put on my own provincial jersey for a minute. I think Leinster scored more than half their games. They scored tries in the first 5 minutes. So I'm not saying that translates to Ireland. Of course, there's similar players and there's different coaches, but I think any good team really wants to put the opposition in their back foot and put doubts in their mind. So Ireland have been going for that fast start for quite a while. So yeah, I wasn't, okay, obviously when it goes in so quick, you're overly surprised. But I think what we've seen from Ireland is that once they can get numerous amount of phases, there's enough attack and threat there that they're going to get very close to a try anyway. And I don't know what, I think Ireland's 22 entries last night versus what they got out in points is quite high. I don't know what the ratio is, but I know from looking at it, it was quite high. And Ireland are able to just put faces together and sort of stress defence, just sort of blind and open and sort of drag players around. And they're always going to go close to a try when they're in that 22. So, as I said, sometimes you might just get a knock-on error and the defence gets a relieving kick out or whatever. But if Ireland hold on to the ball, I'm not surprised that they get within 5 meters. It's just a matter of finishing it then. So I wasn't overly surprised. I think in contrast to Scotland, when they had the sort of 20 phases, as Peter touched on, it was very lateral, very side to side. I know they ended up going backwards, but it just looked like they were, and it was the same against South Africa. South Africa's defence disrupted their attack and just didn't look like they had a plan B. Yeah. Scotland's plan A is very, very good, and it's not, people say about Ireland being number one, and it's no coincidence, and whatever, 16 wins in the trot, or what is it now, 23 wins out of 25.
It's 29 out of 31, I believe.
Yeah, Scotland were fifth for a reason, because they've put away an awful lot of teams. Because their plan A is quite good. I think, again, coming back to, I hate, talking about Townsend all the time, but it was a distinct lack of plan B when plan A isn't working, so and it didn't work against South Africa. And I know South Africa are a very difficult team to get any sort of plan going.
We have a plan B, it's just to do the plan A again.
What's plan C? To do plan B again?
Plan C.
We just add the two of them together and then try again.
Yeah, and Tom, in fairness, you mentioned the centre pair in there, which is something we spoke about beforehand. Like, I believe they had one clean line break against Ireland in the Six Nations, and that led to the try. They had none then for the next, whatever it was, 60, 70 minutes of that game. They had very few, if any, last night. The stats are kind of hard to get for these games. Very few clean line breaks last night, and that kind of lack of a penetration up the middle, like we spoke about it off camera, like, when you have someone like Finn at 10, he's a great passer and everything, but if he's not getting go forward ball from the lads around him, what is he supposed to do?
Yeah, but I think the stat, in defence, the two Scottish centres, stats only tell someone. If you look at the stats from last night's game, apart from the point the try scored and maybe Rooks won, Scotland win on every single stat. You look at line breaks, offloads, meters run, it's Scotland. And then you look at the game physically, it was chalk and cheese. So, I can look back at the Six Nations game and see that the two boys did cause Irish problems, and it was a lot more than just that one line break. I think we were pulling the fence around the place a good bit, and they didn't put enough away chances. So I think it may be a little bit harsh to say they didn't do anything for 60 minutes. I know you're paraphrasing you there, but the stats only sort of tell you so much. You know, if you're looking at, as I said, if you're looking at the stats from last night's game, you'd think Scotland won 36-14. Like, I'm just looking at it here. Clean breaks, defenders breathing, gain line carries, passing, offloads. The only thing we won, apart from the scoreboard, was turnovers won, and then how efficient we are around the rucks. But you know, stats are only one part for me. You wouldn't think looking at that game last night that Scotland were at least dominating on the stats board rather than the actual physical match on the grass. But yeah, I wouldn't be as harsh on the two centres. I think Scotland's problem started up front. And you know, I go back to the selection that I spoke about at the start of the game. I just, you know, the scrum was decent enough at the start. I think the referee was a little bit fussy and a lot of scrums going down. I think we were a little bit lucky to get away some of the calls there. But they are what they are. But once Richie went off, the back row was a problem, and it became an even bigger problem. Like, that trio that Ireland have really dominated every facet of the game, and it doesn't matter what centres are doing, or even your 9 or 10. If you're losing the game at 6, 7, or 8, your game is in trouble. Because, you know, there's 100 rucks in the game. There might be less than 10 scrums or 10 lineouts, but at ruck time, that's where it's all won and lost. And if Ireland want to get the quick ball, which they did, and that long arm presentation, Scotland did try and get in a few times to turn it over, but just that technique of that long reach back to give Gibson Park quick service, and that's why he had such a good game. South Africa were able to disrupt it, and that's why he had a quieter game. But yeah, I just couldn't believe Scotland went with the back row that they did. And obviously you can't plan for Richie getting injured, or maybe you can, or plan something anyway. But it just that was the end of it for me then, because the Irish back row sort of dominated the game.
And it's good you went on to that, because I want to talk next about the selection, as we mentioned, but also kind of those injuries. Jamie Ritchie and Blair Kinghorn go off, but especially because Scotland went 6-2. They didn't have a recognised out half on the bench. They had a flanker and a number 8 in is it Luke Crosby and Matt Fagerson. And David, like, this was a question mark coming into it. You know, going 6-2, there was always that risk not having someone like Hamish Watson on the bench. Yeah. And yet, as Tom said, when Richie goes off and Fagerson comes in, Fagerson's a fine player. But from there on in, O'Mahony, Van der Fleer and Doris were the best back row forwards on the pitch.
I think, I mean, Rory Darge has been fantastic this season in the URC. I don't think there's any doubting about that. The fact that he's pushed Watson down in selection before, you know, that tells you how good a player he is. I think I can live with the back row that they picked. I don't have a problem with the one that they picked. I think not having Watson on the bench was the problem for me. I would have had him on the bench, because you never know how injuries are going to go now. You can't, you know, you don't plan for your captain to go off after 10, 15 minutes, however. But you have something there in place in case you do, or even just in case you need to change the game. And I think Watson, for me, would have been the one who was the game changer there, potentially. I mean, you know, a couple of years ago, he's away on a Lions tour and he's playing fantastically. Now he can't even get in the squad. It just, that for me was a big mistake. And then the 6-2, I think, you know, could Healy have been a better option on the bench? Could we have had another winger and picked Stein on the bench, who's versatile? He can play in 2 or 3 different positions. Could have taken up, you know, the wing or full back if need be. Like, it's all ifs, buts and maybes. On the way that Ireland played last night, and on the way that Ireland started, I'm not sure any squad or any team that we'd picked would have done much better necessarily. Let's be fair. This is an Irish team that is number one in the world for a reason. You know, they played fantastically well. They have done for a long time. They've grown and grown and grown every single year. And I'm not sure we would have had the players to cope with them regardless of who we picked. But I do think there was certain glaring omissions into that team that may have made some difference. May have made the score slightly smaller, may have won it, doubt it, but may have made a difference.
And I suppose it's kind of the narrative coming into it, the picture it paints, because not having, say, Ben Healy on the bench, and this isn't because Ben Healy is Irish or anything, it's more because he's a recognised 10. If Finn isn't having a good day, at least you're like, if Kinghorn stays in the field, you take off Finn. It's a lot of pressure on Kinghorn to go into 10 then as well. Like there's that side of it. I understand Townsend likes him as a 10, but if he's not getting regular minutes, you're putting a lot of pressure on the young lad's shoulders.
Well, it's even just given an option. You know, Finn is very much a player from 10. You know, he wants to play, he wants to go, he wants to find different places on the players in positions and throw the ball around. Healy's not that kind of 10. Healy's a 10 who will get you territory and get you down the pitch. And maybe
kind of brings everyone into the game, kind of.
Yeah, and maybe that's something that we needed more of, was trying to get ourselves further down the pitch. You know, make it difficult for Ireland to score. Yeah. You know, make them work for it. See if they go 80, 90 metres and they've scored a try because they've had an absolute worldie. Well, fair enough. Make them work for it though. And I think too often last night with your tries, we didn't make you work. Not as hard as we'd probably like to.
Yeah, no, that's a fair assumption as well, because like the stat popped up after the game or during the game about kicking. I think at that stage, South Africa, apologies, Scotland had nearly double the amount of kicks of Ireland, but were kicking way longer. But they were just trying to hoof them over James Lowe, who sent them straight back down the field, 70, 80 yards. And like I think we've been there, done that. Like everyone knows that's not what you do to Ireland, because they do have lads like James Lowe who's just going to send it back. And I might move it on to you, Peter, to talk about kind of the key men last night, because I suppose a game like this between two top teams, it's always about who stands out. Plenty of players in green, but also on the Scotland perspective, they probably needed a bigger game from Finn. I know Kinghorn goes off injured, but maybe say Van der Merwe, maybe Jack Dempsey, for instance, as a tone setter. And unfortunately for them, they didn't really get it either.
Yeah. No, as you say, you mentioned Finn Russell there, and we sort of said before recording that if an out half doesn't play well very often, it's a result of his pack going backwards or not giving him front football. And that's very much the case with Finn Russell. I'm a huge Finn Russell fan. I think he's a fantastic player to watch, amazingly skillful. You saw actually glimpses of that as well, some really good passes, but like if you don't have a dominant pack, you can't convert that into points. Whatever magic Finn Russell tries to produce, you need a solid platform to do that. Tuipulotu and Hugh Jones as well in midfield, again, really struggled to contain Aki in particular, defensively poor, and offered really very little going forward. But I think that's I'm stating the blatantly obvious there in terms of the Irish key players and who stood out to me. Again, like it was a case of narrowing it down. You could say 1 to 15. Like everyone had a fantastic game. It was genuinely a huge performance because Scotland. I know off the evidence of last night, you could like Scotland didn't play well, but they are a good team. And I was worried going into this game, I'll be honest. I'll be the first to admit that. I was saying, look, if they win, it'll be tight. Scotland, nothing to lose here. They'll throw everything at it. But in terms of our guys who really stood up, I want to pick out one of the front rowers in particular. I mentioned a couple of guys here, but Andrew Porter, I think, was excellent. Andrew Porter's a guy, props in particular get overlooked so often. In terms of his work at the breakdown, his energy, his ability to get in and compete at the breakdown, turned over. It was a key moment in the first half. Huge, again, I talked about the psychology of a game. Porter gets in, competes, got that big turnover in the first half, and Scottish heads just drop. Turnovers are so, they're such a massive turning point in a game. Again, I think that gets a wee bit overlooked when you're watching it on TV. But guarantee every player in that pitch will feel a turnover. For it really buoyed Ireland, and equally Scotland looked absolutely devastated. Having put in so much hard work. So Porter, a bit of an unsung hero. We all know how good he is, but deserves a special shout out. A combination of two other guys I want to mention: Dan Sheehan and Ian Henderson. Hendy came in for James Ryan, obviously. I think part of that was to help out the line out, which had struggled a wee bit. I'd say if you were to focus on one area of Ireland's game, which wasn't maybe up to scratch, the line out had struggled slightly. And we saw that against South Africa. And we actually saw it in some of the warm-up games. Sorry, not warm-up games, the pool games against some of the other nations. But Ian Henderson did very well, came in. Typically powerful performance, got himself a try as well to cap off what was a really good performance at the set piece. Dan Sheehan, again, apart from his efforts around the field, obviously a very dynamic hooker, great ball carrier, got his 100% in the line out, which again, I'm pleased by the boring stuff, the defense and the set piece. That's your bread and butter, particularly for the front row and your tight five. You're looking to nail those things, and they did that. I think that's absolutely key. The other guys I just want to mention briefly, and again, it's self-evident how good they were last night. Hugo Keenan, Rob Kearney was such a rock for Ireland for so many years, and I think all of us were a bit like, who's going to replace Rob Kearney? Rob Kearney's the man. We're not going to get someone as solid as him. Hugo Keenan can do it all. In terms of his kick returns, his ability to deal with the high ball, a couple of tries into the mix as well.
And definitely not being in touch early in the first half.
I know. We prefer not to take too great of a look at that. if he sticks a foot in touch, whatever, he was fantastic. Bundyaki, again, look, I think, again, don't want to state the obvious too much. He has to be, so far, maybe the player of the tournament. Certainly the best centre in the tournament so far. He made life so difficult for the Scotland centre partnership. What he does, obviously, draws in players. He's kicked on so much. Now, he's always a good player, but he's kicked on so much at this tournament and shown that he is truly world class. Very briefly then, Peter O'Mahony was excellent as well. Disrupted everything Scotland did. Had their pack in the palm of his hand. Keelan Doris added to that as well. Typically excellent from Doris. And finally, quick shout out to Stuart McCloskey, who came in for Mac Hansen. Did very well. It's an interesting one with Stuart McCloskey, and I get what people say. He's not a versatile player. He's an inside centre. You maybe do want someone to cover the back three as well, or potentially even, we want that wee bit of versatility. Stu came on, did very well, a couple of lovely touches, draws in defenders. His offload game's fantastic as well. He's reined that in a lot as well. He used to try and offload everything, even when it wasn't on, but he's reined it in, and he didn't look out of place at all last night. But as I say, we ended up with Gibson Park on the wing quite a lot, and
did a very good job on the wing.
He did so well, but you're playing against the Scotland side who were poor last night. You'd wonder against the likes of New Zealand, how are we going to remedy that? A few big injuries, potential injuries even. So you've got Henshaw's out, you've got Keith Earls. He's the obvious man to slot in. He can. Earls, he's the man. He can slot in anywhere. But in terms of cover, I'd be slightly worried. And as you say, JGP, excellent. It came on, did really well. Fair play to him. But I just wonder against really quality opposition, you need maybe specialists or certainly guys who have played there a decent amount to step in. So I'd be slightly worried about that. But overall, I could have listed everyone, and I nearly did, but those are some of the guys in particular who I'd pick out some fantastic performances.
Yeah. And for anyone who listens to the Red Hand podcast, listing everyone after a win is kind of par for the course. But I'm always happy to do that as well, to be fair. And did Gibson Park, like, that pass for Sheehan's try was on the money, for instance? Like, you even look at Crowley's kick for the Ringrose try. Like, it's the small details. Ringrose and Aki were involved in the first two scores and were just inch perfect. And these are the kind of, if you want to point to, okay, well, if shit hits the fan against New Zealand, these execution errors weren't as plentiful as they were in previous games, for instance. That's always good to see. And I move to the other side of the ball with yourself, Tom, because Peter spoke about earlier as well about defense, but just so solid Ireland were defensively. Like, there was the 20 phase set at one stage. There was really, until the hour mark, Scotland did not look like scoring a try at all, and it was only when the game opened up. If Ireland are to go all the way, defense is going to be huge. Like, we've spoken about that before. What would you have any concerns at the moment, though, when you do look at, say, Henshaw's out, we could be without Hansen or Lowe, or do you think systematically it's in a very good place as well, or even both?
Oh, with both probably is the answer to that question. In short, I think systematically you have to be 100% happy where Ireland is, but there's I don't know what that game is where you keep Kerplunk or something, where you keep adding things and eventually it'll break. There's only so many players you can afford to lose as best as you just, I think if you look at James Lowe, maybe is sort of an epitome of the Irish defence. He's a guy that came to Leinster and people looking at his defence as non-existent. He was used to playing Chiefs rugby and it was just all out attack and defending was like what? So if you look at his growth in the game and how he fits into that Irish defence, and I think that shows you where Ireland are at in terms of defending the ball. You look across from 1 to sort of 15, there's no real weak defender in that team. You know what I mean? There's no way I would have thought that looking at James Lowe's first few games for Leinster that he would be lifting Evan Etzebeth on his shoulder and stopping him. That just seems universe, let alone worlds away. But Ireland's game has always been built on that sort of strong defence and just that system of knowing and trusting the guy outside you. Like Sexton obviously leads that as well. He doesn't shy from defence. Gibson Park had some good defence last night again when he went out to the wing, and again that shows you that the system was working. There's no doubt New Zealand will stretch and test Ireland a lot more than Scotland. Unfortunately, they didn't. But the system itself is outstanding. Everything is sort of built on defence, really, and from there on in, as you said earlier on, we had 200 tackles. And going back to David's point, I think made earlier about kicking. I think Scotland probably would have benefited from kicking the ball a bit more and going long into territory. I know you've got James Lowe, but then you just don't kick it to James Lowe's side, especially when Hansen went off. And then again, especially when Lowe went off. I know the game may have been gone at that stage, but yourself when you're looking at rugby, there's certain props that are world class, and you just have some random guy that maybe plays loose head for the Dragons or something that just gets under your skin and you just don't have his number. And for me, Ireland, and I'm even looking at Leinster over the last few years playing against Racing, just have Finn's number on the way he plays. It's just a bad mix for Finn. And Finn, as the lads, we all said, the season tickets in Bath are going to go through the roof. Not that it's a fairly full place anyway, because he's always worked the entrance fee and he's what he does. So it's not a criticism of him. I just think Ireland is a bad match for him. Because I think Ireland did end up kicking twice as much in the end, and he was 30-17. I felt Scotland maybe could have kicked a bit more, but that's not Finn's game. He likes to take it to the line and look for those offloads and soft shoulders. And if you know what's coming, well, then that's easier to shut it down. And that's what happened there. That's part of Ireland's defence. It's just a bad mix for Russell playing against Ireland in the way he plays. He just needed to maybe do something different. And Kinghorn obviously would have given that, because I actually like Kinghorn fullback. I think he's a quality player and he's a good future for Scotland.
He suits how they play perfectly. I think
he's a good attacking threat as well. He would have hit that line, that 3/4 line outside Hugh Jones, and that was a loss to how Scotland were attacking, because the young fella that came on just, it seemed a bit out of position for him. So that to give, because Scotland like to go wide fairly quick, and Kinghorn would have been sort of one of those line breakers Scotland would have been relying on, and it just was taking a piece out too many out of their attack, and it helped Ireland's defence.
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, I think the reality of cup rugby and international rugby is there's going to be injuries and blows and whatever. And to their credit, Gibson Park is not a known tackling aggressive scrum half. We did well. He landed one great shot on, I think it was Ollie Smith at one stage. I can't quite remember. He kind of sat him down. And like this, that's what you want to see. If a lad is going to be asked to do a job for 40 minutes once every 2 years, whatever it might be, just to do it and to as well as he did was unbelievable. And David, I do want to finish on Scotland. And this is the last we'll talk about Scotland, if that pleases you in any way. I put up a tweet last night. I kind of said they feel like a bit of an enigma of a team. Like they do play nice rugby, but it's imperfect. Like every brand, but it's imperfect. Like they're well coached, but have glaring issues. Like we know they can be top teams, but history suggests they are more of a flat track bully. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, but yes, they beat England every year the last couple of years, but have fallen at the line against Ireland. That's more my point. Like, where do they go from here now? Like Townsend had 1 foot out the door and 1 hand on a new contract the whole way through the year. It feels like they're kind of, yeah, we're good, but I don't know what's the best way to put it, but I feel like they're as close to falling as they are as close to rising, and that's maybe that's your sense.
Yeah. Well, they've given him a new contract, so unless they're going to pay him off with a significant bonus or leaving, I can't see that he's going anywhere. Because they gave him the new contract before the World Cup as well, so that suggested that they were happy with it, however it went. So we've got at least, I can't remember the length of it. I think it might be to 2026.
So 2026 or 2027.
I'm sure it's before the World. I'm sure it's the year before the next World Cup. So it would appear that that's what they're happy to do. We are kind of stuck in this purgatory, I suppose. We're the best of the rest, and I would say probably at this moment in time we're one of the best of the rest by far. Maybe Wales have stepped up massively in this World Cup, so we'll see where they go. But we're probably one of the best of the rest, out with the top 4 teams or so in the world, but not good enough to get into that top 4 either. You know, we're a good bit behind that top 4. So I don't know where we go.
Eddie Jones.
Stop, yeah. This is bad as saying Matt Williams.
oh, there's no swearing on that. Jesus, Eddie Jones, bloody hell. Aye, that would be good fun. He can sign for Japan and then leave Japan and come to us. Who I just don't know. I mean, as I said, they've obviously they gave him this contract. We all knew what was going to happen in the World Cup. We all knew roughly that third was we were likely to be third, possibly second. Let's look at that. Look at it that way. I don't think we were ever going to have a chance of winning the group. But depending on how things go, we may have sneaked second. So it suggests to me that they're happy, that they know that potentially third was the best they were going to get. You can't sack him on the back of that, having given them a new contract. That makes the union look stupid. So we need to find a plan B. That would be a start. And we need to see what players are coming through, because obviously it's the end of, we talk about it in cycles. We're coming to the end of a 4-year cycle. Richie Gray's not going to be there much longer. He's 33, 34. So on an international stage, you're probably talking the end of his career. you're looking at other players who are getting into their 30s, even Russell's in his early 30s, I think now. So have we blown what would have been our golden generation? Possibly. We haven't got anything to show for it. No Six Nations, no knockout World Cup matches. It's hard to see. It's hard to see where we go. Will anybody coming in make it better? I don't know. Can he coach those players any better? Possibly, but you're still working with a very limited squad, limited resources at our end, whereas you guys have got quite the academy system coming through, and the young players coming through. Our young players over the last couple of years in the Six Nations and things haven't done very well.
Yeah.
So I think our best chance of silverware is possibly behind us now. We maybe should have been looking at a coming into this World Cup with a Six Nations win, maybe not a Grand Slam, but with a Six Nations, and that's not happened.
Or at least a top two finish as well. Like it's been third place at best, and
even a top two. Me and a couple of guys have spoken before about how nice would it be to go into one of these final days of the Six Nations knowing that, there's a chance we could actually come away with the title today. And has that really happened? No. As I said, not a Grand Slam, that's fair enough, I accept that. But, have we looked like we're going to win the Six Nations at any point? No. So,
yeah.
I don't know where we go from here.
Yeah, it's that's the thing. Like the silverware thing is a good point, because it does feel like Scotland should have won at least a Triple Crown or something the last couple of years to be more than good enough. Obviously, not being able to get over the line against Ireland is the main reason. And I think it was 2022 that you lost to Wales, or 2021 and 2022, actually, I think it was. Yeah. Both one score games, lost to the death. But yeah, there's certainly that question mark. And then like Townsend now is going to be he joined up in 2018, I think it was, or I believe, or late 2017. So he's a good few years in the job now, and there's going to be question marks, I suppose, especially with the under-20s not doing well. Tom, I might just come to you. You're kind of good for the bigger picture stuff as well. Like, what do you think is an issue with Scotland, or potential fix? And don't say Eddie Jones again, but what do you think they can do?
I think, look, it starts with the two clubs, Glasgow and Edinburgh. I think both have had sort of peak times, but not at the same time. And sometimes when you have two clubs, I know they've got some players that don't play in the URC, but they've had a really good Glasgow team, and Edinburgh struggle, and then Edinburgh, obviously Glasgow have been the mainstay of the last, since probably 2016. Probably the mainstay, and Edinburgh come good and come. I think more effort needs to happen to hold on to some of the players that are playing not in Scotland for that continuity. So stuff like that, I think the SRU should and can do. And then, as David pointed out, it's the fault is at their door with what's coming through at under-20s. Has been fairly poor enough, and that's not Gregor Townsend's fault. The Scottish SRU have to sort of look at that. Look, it's very easy to be shitty about how Scotland are going, straight after a loss like that, where they feel they don't turn up. I don't think the situation is as bad as we're sort of painting. Scotland probably a little bit unfortunate to run into a good Ireland and a good France team for the last 5 years. And in other times they would have won a Six Nations. Now I know every country could probably say similar stories over the years. I know Ireland won a couple of Triple Crowns in the 80s when France were like worldies. So that happens, but it's just, I don't think Scotland are as bad as maybe the mood of the morning after a match like last night is. I think they'd be right to hold on to Townsend. I think it'd be just too knee-jerk to get rid of him. It wouldn't solve the issue. And the SRU just back the clubs a bit more and get some guys that aren't playing in I'm not saying Finn Russell may be outside the budget. Rumor, but he's on in Bath. But other players that are just not playing in Scotland, maybe get them back as best you can. But the URC, maybe you can see the South Africans starting to bring a few players back that they lost as the URC money trickles down to them. So that's probably the next challenge for the SRU and the clubs up there.
Yeah, we'll move on past Scotland now. David might breathe a sigh of relief, but before we go, I do want to talk about the quarterfinals next weekend. Before hopefully get to touch on them during the week as well. Ireland against New Zealand is set in stone. That is on Saturday night at 8 o'clock. France against South Africa is Sunday night at 8 o'clock. Two humdinger battles there. Peter, I'll come to you first of all for this one. How do you see it going, both of them? Because we don't have the other two quarterfinals confirmed as we speak, but those two, and can Ireland break the curse, or are you going to wait to see how the injury report is on Monday or Tuesday?
Yeah, I think that was the first thing I was going to mention is in terms of the injury list, slightly concerning. So it's Mac Hansen. I think it was his calf injury. James Ryan's wrist looked a bit dodgy as well. We've obviously Hendy to step in, but James Ryan's a great guy to bring off the bench. But he didn't look. His wrist didn't look right. He stayed on the pitch. Just didn't look comfortable with it. James Lowe, and then Henshaw and Keith Earls also doubts as well. But yeah, so look, there's Ireland. Look, it's all relative, and I think we've done actually really well. Rugby's a really attritional game, and you get a lot of injuries, whereas Ireland have actually done well to avoid any major injuries we've seen in other teams. So I think everyone was concerned about Sexton. He's held up relatively well. My concern isn't so great. Now, obviously, we want to keep Sexton, but Jack Crowley was a fantastic, guy to come on. I think, can we win a World Cup if Sexton gets injured? I don't know. I don't even want to have to think about it yet. But my point is, look, in some ways, every rugby team at this level is relatively delicate because an injury, a couple of significant injuries to key players, a card. So even before the Scotland game, chatting with friends and stuff, people were saying, "Oh, well, should win this comfortably enough." I was saying, no. See, we get a red card early doors, could be a different scenario. Equally, we're in a position, New Zealand, I think, in terms of performances, in terms of the overall atmosphere in the squad, momentum. I think our win over South Africa, and then obviously a bit of a confidence boost against Scotland. I think we're in a better place, but there are those things that can go wrong. I'm going to obviously say I think Ireland can beat New Zealand, and I predict that they will. But New Zealand are formidable, and obviously we can't underestimate them. It's become sort of joke about it becoming routine beating the All Blacks now, whereas for years they had that aura about them. And like Ireland have New Zealand have been there and done it. They've won the World Cup. They've certainly progressed further than Ireland ever have. We haven't got past the quarters, and that actually means quite a lot. Again, there's that psychological hurdle that Ireland need to get over. But I think despite my sort of negative outlook and pessimistic outlook sometimes, I think we will win against New Zealand.
That's a good way to start it. David, I'll come over to you now because I suppose either you're going to put a dampener on us or you're going to tell us that we're playing like one of the best teams in the world, like plenty of Scots have, thankfully. But it really feels too tight to call at the moment. Either the two quarterfinals are set in stone, I should add, because it's important to look at France, South Africa as well while there's the chance. And like Ireland are doing unreal. South Africa are playing great rugby. France, New Zealand have been unbelievable. So which way do you see it going?
It must be rotten beating the All Blacks every year. Must be so hard for you.
Thank you. It is.
You must get sick of it. I don't think you'll have a better chance. Let's be honest. You have had a number the last couple of times that you've met them. They're playing really well. if you can't do it with this group of players, then
Don't put it like that.
no, and
It's
I
true,
know,
yeah.
but you know,
It is. No, it is. It is. It's just
if you can't do it with this group of players, you're never going to do it.
Yeah.
And that's the basics of it. You know,
Same can be said for France too. That's the other side of it.
Yeah. Well, that's the flip side of it. I think it's between the two of you as to who wins this. I don't see others. I would like the Springboks to do well as well, to be quite honest. But I know obviously it's only going to be one of those two that goes through. But it has to be between you and France, I think. If France can't do it with this generation and the fact that they've got a home tournament, you guys can't get through to the quarters with this group of players against a good but not outstanding All Blacks team. You know, it's not the All Blacks team of 2015.
Thankfully not.
Then,
I said thankfully not. That would be very scary.
If you can't do it against that team, then it's not going to happen. What I will say is if whoever you have in the semis, should you get through, that's going to be one hell of a game.
That'll be the winner of Wales and, well, it looks like Argentina at the moment, but
was that sorry, I think, yeah, of course, the final's going to be a hell of a game. But Wales and Argentina, I don't see either of those two causing you a problem. So you're either, France or South Africa, I think, is what you're going to end up with. If it's South Africa, well, we've already had the taster for that already. I mean, that was as good as a final anyway. If it's France on home turf in the Stade de France, that's gonna be one hell of a game, regardless of who wins. But you won't have a better chance.
Yeah, and you'd probably rather play France in a final, because the old adage, finals are more of a leveler than anything else. Everyone is nervous. Everyone has, there's a lack of a home advantage to some degree. Tom, like, a big thing that we talked about way back when I had Jamie Wall on the pod preview New Zealand was the front row and how that improvement had really helped New Zealand in recent times. Now Tyra Lomax is out for the weekend, and Ireland did go down to New Zealand with I think Lowe and Hansen. I think Hansen only started one of those 3 games, if I remember correctly. Like, we had 3 different centre partnerships in those 3 games. It really is hard to call, but it's hard not to say that Ireland aren't a better team if they're at full strength.
Well, look, because I remember looking at Ireland in the 90s. I think we won 8 matches in total in the 5 nations as it was then. And if somebody was to tell me fast forward and say we won 5 of the last 8 games against New Zealand in the last 7 years, I'd be like, something severely severely wrong has happened in the direction of where the world has gone for that to happen. Yeah, I agree with David's right. We'll never have a better chance. We have to believe ourselves. I think if we play well, I think we are probably better than New Zealand. I think we have a lot more structure, but it's an open play structure where there's a lot of attack. Right? I think New Zealand still depend on that individual brilliance, which they have, and at any given time can beat the other 3 teams that are around them. But I think the reason they're not doing it as much, I think I read a stat, they've only won 4 of their last 12 games against South Africa, France and Ireland.
Yeah.
And that just tells me that they have the individual brilliance. We all know, like, the back 3 they have and what they can bring to the game. But the consistency has them in there. So look, I'm not going to do a Blair Kinghorn. Say we're going to win. But David's right. We're never going to have a better chance. Out of those 5 wins, there's obviously, out of the last 8 games, there's one big asterisk in the middle of that run, and that was the quarterfinal the last time. But I think this is a different team now. I think only half the pack has changed. I think only Peter, Tig, Josh, and somebody else whose names escape, Henderson, are there from then, as in the starting team. I think only 2 of the back line is there, which is Sexton and Ringrose. So, the James Ryans of this world and the Andrew Porters who beat New Zealand junior All Blacks at under 20 level, that aura is gone, and it's a lot in rugby. You know what I mean? Whether you're playing, my club up here is Skerries, and there's teams you just can't beat, and I'm sure the same and to be said then in Munster or over in Glasgow. There's certain teams you just can't beat at a club level, whether it be local club or at international level. But for Ireland, that it wasn't a monkey on the back. It was a fucking silverback gorilla by the time we eventually beat them. It's long gone, and these bunch of players are well used to winning. So they'll go in on an even playing field against New Zealand and feel like if they play well, they'll win. And that's really all. If you put yourself in that position as a team, that's all you can do. I know some decisions might go on the night, but that's out of your control. I think Ireland are playing well enough and consistent enough. We've already said about the run of games they've had and how many wins out of 30, whatever. New Zealand are going to have to play very well, the best they've played in the World Cup, to win. Like, they've only beaten, they've only beaten maybe Uruguay and initially that really didn't turn up. So it's not ideal prep for them either. Where Ireland have, even though last night's game wasn't as hard as maybe we thought it would be, they've had 2-part pool games against South Africa and Scotland and come out relatively unscathed. And David's right to point out, let's wait for the injuries, because I think Ireland, the way we play and the system we have, I think it's important those 2 wingers are back fit. The way, of Lowe for his exits and Hansen for his sort of attack mindedness in the wide channels and the ability to put pressure on Gary Owens and stuff like that he's the best in the squad by far at doing that sort of thing. It's those sort of things he's just going to take for granted that add to the game. So yeah, look, best chance we're going to have of beating New Zealand. The aura's gone off with them for us. So yeah, just can't wait for next Saturday. Should be a humdinger of a game.
Well, hopefully it is a good game, but I'd take a 3-0 win too, all the same, if it comes to it. Lads, thank you very much for joining me. We probably ran on a bit long, but it's great to chat about Ireland's chances and the game, and as well to touch on Scotland as well, without being just 3 biased Irish lads. We're just 3 Irish biased lads and a Scotsman as well, for a good measure. I'll be back tomorrow night with our flagship World Cup review podcast. As always, we look back on the weekend's games, to wrap up the pools, and talk about probably the game of the week that's happening in front of our eyes here as Japan play Argentina in a cracker. As always, thanks home to everyone for listening, and again to the lads for coming on, to Tom, to David, and to Peter. And if you like what you see or hear, please do subscribe. You'll find the links for my channels down below. But for now, and until next time, take it easy.